On Carlos again for another expert session number 60. And today I'm joined by Joeri Billast, who's an experienced CMO and someone with a very interesting portfolio career. Joeri, before introducing you, I'm going to do something different today. And we'll start with a controversial provocation. Yuri, CMOs have the shortest tenure in the C-suite, and some say the role is broken. Others say it's reborn. What's your take? What's your take? Is the traditional CMO model dead?
Well, it's not that, I would say. If you mean the traditional model, hey, it's changing. Let's say the CMO role is not that, but it is changing. I began my talk at Digit Innovation with that the CMO role is being rebuilt. You know, it's more about AI, which will be often talked about today. I think it's about data, it's about community, it's about storytelling. And as you know, I'm a fractional CMO, which is another trend I see that more and more of the CMOs are a fractional role. So that's if you would look on LinkedIn, if you do a search fractional CMO and you would compare the number of results with 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it's really piloted. Like
Very interesting. So, Joeri Billast is a marketing futurist and the host of Web3 CMO Stories podcast. He works as a fractional CMO, helping businesses navigate the new marketing landscape powered by AI, Web3, and community-led strategies. Yuri also runs immersive retreats and masterminds focused on the future of technology, storytelling, and leadership. So, Yuri, welcome to our expert sessions. Well, we met in Portugal, and we were introduced by Rene, who's also a member here at the Evolve Commerce Club. And basically, you have 8 core ideas, right? Where you speak about this, about Web3 CMOs of the future. I really believe also in, not believe, but I like the idea of building a portfolio career. So before we speak about your 8 core ideas, let's you're speaking out of Portugal. Let's just talk a little bit about your career and how did you get to where you are today, where you're sitting today, and then we'll speak about your 8 core ideas.
Okay, I won't make it too long. But yeah, like I've moved to Portugal in August. But before that, I lived in Belgium. I started my career in Belgium for a telecom company first. Then I worked for a consulting company. I launched my own consulting company, which was around business analytics, which I grew, from 0 to 13 people we were. And then I sold that company because I wanted to do something else. At the same time, I had an investment club also since my studies, like what everything that is happening on the stock markets. So discussing this with friends around me. And then those two things, like having a business intelligence company and then the investment club, made me go to Web3 later. But I was not directly to Web3 because after I sold my company, I went into, let's say, tech marketing. So more around how to use tools for your business, for your marketing, how to use social media, because at that time I gave talks about Facebook marketing and so on. That was a thing. I always like to be a step ahead, be one of the first people that talks about a certain subject. And so at that time, it was social media marketing. But then at a certain moment, everyone was talking about social media marketing. And then it made sense for me to go in the direction of Web3. So then with the company that I have now, I'm working for myself. I have no people anymore on the payroll, just a few freelancers. I went in the direction of Web3. It was easy for me to pivot, of course, because I didn't have, all these employees anymore. And for me, Web3 is an umbrella term, Carlos. It's also interesting to know that depending who you talk to, I will say that it is an umbrella term for blockchain, crypto, metaverse, virtual worlds, and AI, actually all emerging new technologies. And so for me, it made sense with my background in business intelligence, in social media marketing, and having had an investment club. All of these three pillars, I would say, came together in what I'm doing right now. Is I'm a fractional CMO for Web3 and AI startup scale-ups. I create also content. As you know, I have my podcast, Web3 CMO Stories, which has been supported by CoinDesk and now by Rio, which you can see on the background, my sponsor. I'm sorry I mentioned them. I hope it's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. So this is actually the second thing I love to do. Make content. Also the books you see on the background. Books. My book I've written myself, which is the 5K challenge for solopreneurs, which was before the ChatGPT moment. About how to make 5K on social media. It didn't do well in Belgium, but it was a bestseller thanks to my American friends on Amazon. So that's also a great story to tell. Sometimes changing environment changes what can happen with something. And so the content creation is the second part. And then the third part is my Sintra Synergies retreat, which I will be doing in September here in Sintra. I am a connector, Carlos. I love to connect like you. We are people. We go to a place, we get to know new people, and we connect with each other, and we connect others with each other, and so on. So I love that. I love to build community, and I did this already in Belgium, and I want to create an event here in Portugal, in Sintra, which is different than a typical conference where you have a lot of conversation, you meet a lot of people, you get overwhelmed, and you have a lot of good contacts, but you need to follow up with all of them, and it can be a bit scary, overwhelming for most people. Now, a retreat will be like with 15, 20 leaders in the space where you get to know each other on a deeper level. You are going to walk together. You have a conversation during the walk, a conversation during dinner, you do a workshop together, and by that you build relationships, partnerships, and so on. So those are all the things I'm doing. I hope this was not too long, but
No,
all
that's
these years.
lovely, and I would like to delve it a bit more into that journey, entrepreneurial journey, because in our club, like we have, I would say around 20% of our members, plus 20ish, are like you, like people, but then you have different stages. First time into a new career, consultants with a very solid career. Then we have people who are transitioning to become or like full-time advisors, or they want to broaden their wallet, let's say, of advisory clients. And so, and even for me, that's a very interesting topic. And Yuri, like I've always been a consultant all of my life. Had one job, like full-time job here in Denmark, didn't work out very well. And then I went back into being a consultant, and now we have the club, and we have different pillars in the club and services that we offer. And so, but what I find it fascinating, it's like we are, yes, connectors, and we are creators as well, right? So and that's more like a selfish question, but I know I have people in a club who are going through the same. And so the question is more like, what type of, because yes, you mentioned some really interesting things. So number one, change your environment and change how you're perceived. Sometimes in your environment, people won't necessarily value what you do, and we see this all the time with Brazilian artists. Like they are very successful in Europe, and many artists in Brazil are not successful, which is very curious, right? So you change your environment, you build some interesting, let's say, American friendships, and then you became a bestseller. And so I think that's a very interesting thing that you mentioned. And the other thing is building a career, or transitioning into a career as a, let's say, a creator first, and then you have other abilities that you develop throughout the years. But you're a creator, you had a network, and then you can monetize that. So I would like selfishly uh, speaking to dig into that because well that's what I do, you know, like and then we'll get to the 8 core ideas. But tell me a bit about the pushback, the challenges, you know, getting brand deals, getting sponsors, and how's that worked out and it's working out for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, of course, and it doesn't start. You don't get these brand deals or these sponsors or the collaborations from day one. It takes time to build trust. I have been in different roles. I've been in different communities.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, meeting different people, and depending on where I was at that time in my life, I had different goals, and based on the goals, you take actions, right? So yeah, talking about maybe my podcast, about maybe the book, and then the retreat, because those are different things that can be interesting for you. Now the book, writing a book is not easy. I'm more like a speaker than like a writer. It was before the AI, the ChatGPT moment. So but I managed to write a book at a certain moment after 2 years of struggling, because writing is not so easy for me. I had a coach who was a bestseller in Europe. She helped me how to write it. But at a certain moment, she said, Joeri, why don't you make it a challenge? Why don't you make audio files and have a copywriter write the book? I did that, and in 3 weeks, the book was done and it was published. But then it's not because you have a book that you get sales or you get people interested. So in Belgium, I don't know how it is in Denmark or in other places, but in Belgium, compared to, for instance, the US, people are a bit more like, not thinking so big, and they speak many languages in Belgium. So Dutch, French is the native language for most people, or German, and English is then another language. So they are less comfortable in English. So they had a lot of reasons why not to buy the book. Because it's in English, because they don't believe that. Yeah, Carlos, it's strange
Yeah.
because I launched the book actually as a challenge with an email automation. So every day someone got a tasks to do, and I got reply from people, and I saw they put my book into Google Translate and to be able to execute everything. So it's not because people, a lot of them talk English, that they like to read books in English. So that's, if you have entrepreneurs as an audience, which I had, small entrepreneurs, small business owners, I'm not talking about marketers or working for big companies who are used to speak English. So that was like something that I noticed. But yeah, the book was ready. I was a bit frustrated about why people didn't want to buy the book. Everyone wanted to have the book for free. I went to conferences and said, I have the book. Oh, can I get the book? Can I get the book? Everyone wanted to have the book. But, to pay a few bucks for it, that was, people always like to get something for free. And so, yes, I was a bit frustrated. Also, people said, I don't believe that you can make 5K on social media in 21 days and so on. And that was the idea of the book. And so I said, okay, a bit frustrated. I take the book with me to social media marketing worlds. I showed that book to people. Now, the cover, if you see the 5K, it's more like American-like cover. Americans like this type of cover. And I also met people who could help me how to launch the book. I made connections with the right people. I had support from those people. I put it on Amazon. And of course, if you want to be #1 bestseller, you have to have enough sales in a short duration of time to get that spot. It doesn't mean for the full year, but so during 3 weeks, I made a #1, and that was nice to have because of making connections and talking to people. So that's for the book in a nutshell. Now for the podcast, also same thing. I started from zero. Both of us, we are not native English speakers. So for me, I would say, should I do the podcast in English? Because people around me, they might say, oh, why do it in English? And I had already the experience with the book, but I said, no, I will do this. The only people that would give a remark would be like Belgians that say, oh, you speak English with a Belgian accent. But in the US, they started to recognize me because they said, "Oh, that's the guy with the Belgian accent." So they recognized me. It was like,
The
something
charm.
good.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Actually, and also in communities, because then I stand out. While I was in Belgium, it was like, a disadvantage. In the, going to another place, it's an advantage. I stood out. People recognized me. People said, "Oh, but you speak 4 languages. That's amazing. We only speak one." And so a different environment gave another boost to the podcast. I started to get more and more people, more and more connections. And by doing it, without expecting directly a return, I just said I do the podcast. And every time I do a podcast episode, it's like having a conversation with someone. Like we having a conversation, and you're also recording, doing this live, doing this expert session. But we're also having a good conversation. Even if no one is listening, Carlos, we still have a good conversation, right? And it was like, that was my mindset. And then at a certain moment, I got an email from CoinDesk, which is a big media company in Web3. And they said, "We want to sponsor you for to promote our consensus event in Austin, which is a big Web3 event in the world." And I thought, this is a scam. This cannot be true, right? And so it came through my website. They filled in the type form, and I got a message. But I checked; it all seemed legit, and actually, it was legit. And it could only happen because I did all the work before. And then once you get one win, I would say it's easier to get other wins that are following upon that, because I can now say CoinDesk supported me. Why would you not support me? Like now, I had recently Philip Kotler on my podcast, who is like the inventor of modern marketing. Now, this guy, okay, is 93 now, almost 94 years old, but he is the name in marketing. So this will also open doors, to have other podcast guests. So it's like step by step. And then the retreat, it's actually built upon all the rest, built upon the podcasting, the networking. I meet people. That I think can benefit to connect with each other. And now I am in Portugal. I am building my network here. I feel there is a community here, or there are people here that either are expats or they move to Portugal and they need to find their community. They want to build connections, or people that are Portuguese, but they want to connect, with a certain number of people because they are working for international companies, they are in Web3, AI. And so the brand partnerships also come through the podcast, to the personal brand. And this actually, but everything is tied together, is the personal brand. And by having the personal brand and having all these different content pieces and initiatives around it, it helps me to build clarity, because now Rio, they also decided to support my Sintra Synergist retreat, but they did that because they supported my podcast, and he supported my podcast because I moderated their panel in Toronto at the Blockchain Futurist conference, which was actually on main stage. They asked me to moderate their panel there, and this went really well. But they asked me to moderate their panel because they were my podcast, and so it's actually a chain of things that happen.
Events. Yeah. No, fascinating. I promise this is my final selfish question, but so it's so interesting how you develop your career, and kudos to you. It's really amazing. So there are a few things in my mind here. For example, should you, like for us, for Gustavo and I, it's been a process of discovery. When we started Evolve, we thought we were going to focus on alliance building between companies, because we come from that world of building alliances, which essentially is partnerships. It essentially is connecting people, companies, to help them in international markets. But over time, we started noticing a pattern, and senior professionals like yourself, like Rene, approaching us and say, "Hey, your community, your network is great. How can we be part of it?" So we kind of shifted the focus. Instead of focusing on people working for organizations, we started focusing on senior pros, And now we have companies that are approaching us. It's kind of like, so it's odd because our initial thought or reasoning was to focus in businesses, right? And then we changed our let's say we stopped focusing on the companies because people were too busy, started paying more attention to senior professionals who wanted to develop a portfolio career. That's why I asked you about becoming a portfolio professional. And we see now companies interested in connecting with these professionals because they are real accelerators. So there's a very interesting story about Ryan Holiday, which wrote several books. Not sure if you know this, but apparently he used to write about marketing, right? But he was someone who really liked philosophy and stoicism. He was writing about marketing, and his personal brand wouldn't pick up, But when he started talking about stoicism and really becoming an expert in that field, like becoming the person in that field, I mean, it wasn't a red ocean anymore. It was more like a blue ocean, right? But he was using everything that he knew about marketing. So essentially, he's doing the same. He's leveraging all his marketing skills, but he's talking about something else. That means he created a category, right, uh, of his own. Like he's the guy, let's say, who talks about stoicism nowadays. So I'm very curious about, should you try to be intentional about building an audience, or you figure your audience as you progress? I think I spoke a lot, but does it make
No,
sense?
it makes sense, yeah, and actually it evolves, huh? like
Yeah.
like evolve. I think you chose the right name because everything is evolving. Not only the environment, everything around you, but you yourself are evolving. If you would talk to the Joeri of 10 years ago, it's a total different Joeri too. I did other stuff, other communities, other connections. So, and of course, your audience also changes. And I'll also change my audience from a Belgian Flemish speaking audience to an English speaking audience. From like making bigger companies I talked to before to maybe smaller companies or consultants or like people working for themselves or builders or like small business owners. So my audience changed also. And with the audience, the communities that I mean change, because communities, I think it's better to aim for a good community around you, which you are building with Evolve, than an audience, because an audience typically you talk to, but you don't get back a lot. In a community, you are networking, but you are doing like, you build people around, you network around you, and people are getting value by talking to each other. So yes, I think it's natural that it evolves. It's also natural that you have people that are in your network and then they resonate with you at a certain moment, but at a certain moment it doesn't fit anymore, and then they don't follow you anymore, you don't meet them anymore, and you have fresh people coming in. It's like with everything in life, right? It's also with friends, you are like I come everywhere, I make a lot of friends, but a lot of relationships if you want. But it's normal, you cannot keep up with everyone. Like the same with your audience, it will also refresh. It's like your mailing list on your newsletter. You have people that at a certain moment will not follow you anymore, and you will have new people. And it's healthy to have it like that.
Of
And that you
course.
pivot, that's normal.
Yuri, let's cover the 8 core ideas that you cover during your talks. Basically, you talk about the role of CMO being rebuilt, AI and fractal storytelling, stories that stick, the CMO as a value officer, Audacity, community driven, marketing as a technologist, and being the pretty much the captain of the ship. So, starting with core idea number 1, the role of the CMO being rebuilt. CMOs must be AI engaged, story driven, and community powered. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so this is actually also this evolves. I talk about the CMO of the future. I did the same talk in Cairo in Egypt in December, and then I would say the same talk, the same title. Now it was a shorter talk in Oeiras, but by talking to people, so also my talk evolves. So not only the audience. But yeah, for me, the role is a rebuild. You mentioned it right. The three forces that I'm seeing. AI, of course, is really important. It's everywhere. I also mentioned in my talk that it's a big opportunity because the most CMOs are not ready for what is coming. And so AI first, I would say, story driven and community powered. Those are the three pillars. But the problem is that only 1 in 4 CMOs even has an AI strategy. They're using maybe ChatGPT, they're using prompts, but they don't have an AI strategy. On the side of the, I would say, the storytelling, this is also really important that you bring stories, because if it's only about features, it's without emotions, then you are not winning. And 70% of buyers, they really want, really are craving emotional resonance and not only like messages that they would get. And then the third thing is, of course, is community. Yeah? So the brands that are winning today, they are not like just sending out messages, publicity promotions, but they are really building tribes, having people together, being a following. They move people, I would say.
Brilliant. Do you think, like, if we speak about portfolio careers and pretty much how we see a lot of people in our club and yourself, this evolution of the role of the CMO, like, do you think it opens more doors for CMOs to build more flexible and portfolio style careers? Because we hear a lot. I mean, that this fractional sort of title is something quite common in the US, and probably also given how they work there, like they're paid per hours and so on. In Europe, I think it's still something to happen, but not so common. And I'm broadly speaking, probably varies
Yeah.
according to niches and so on. But how do you think that opens that is changing? How do you see that, Yuri?
I see, yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, I see a change that in the beginning, the word fractional CMO, you never heard it in Europe. It was something in the US. When I started to call myself a fractional CMO, I think people said, what is this? I always needed to explain what it is. Even, to English speaking people, natively English speaking people, I needed to explain what is a fractional CMO. Now it's less needed because there are more and more people that are fractional, like in a CMO role or a CFO role, or in a CTO role even. It's more and more a trend. Also because in the sectors that I'm active, like in these technology sectors, there are lots of startups, and they want to have the right guidance, but it is expensive to have like senior people on board. But if they can have like the brains of senior people with that already have some experience, have the network and so on. If you can have their brain for a fraction of the time, this is really win-win. That's how I explain what I'm doing. You get 100% of my brain, and the connections I have and the network, and for a fraction of the time. And that's how a fractional CMO works. One of the advantages is also because you work with different companies. I have more experience because I talk to different people. I can connect people. I see definitely as a trend. Also because times, we live in uncertain times. Also, you see a lot of people that are losing jobs, and if you don't have more, I would say, I would not say consulting missions, because it isn't the consulting, more agreements or more contracts as a fractional CMO, it also helps you to create more independent, I would say, work.
Yeah, and I think another interesting point that you bring, you didn't say that, but it's kind of like, VCs, they invest, they have several investments, so that means they have perspective in different sectors eventually, right? Or what's happening in the economy. So I think a fractional CMO can also bring a different perspective and knowledge from, maybe they are in the same sector, but they can bring a different perspective to the company, because they they're involved in different projects. You talk about, so core idea number 2 is the fractal storytelling. So what is fractal storytelling, and how can CMOs use AI to scale brand narratives without losing authenticity?
Yeah, so fractal storytelling, and it's interesting because Dennis Yu was a speaker in Oeiras at the conference where we met, and he also heard it for the first time. So the term is, I think, maybe quite new, but you will hear it more and more. It's actually the idea of taking one core narrative and scaling it across different channels, context, communities, without feeling that it is copy pasted, but pieces of something that is going on in your company, your business, something real. If it's emotional, even better. An emotional truth, something that is true about your comment, about your company, about your brand. So I'm not talking about a campaign. I'm talking about something more. I would say your brand, and this is maybe a good metaphor, it's like a living, breathing narrative that adapts and scales. So, and if you have a narrative around what you're doing with Evolve, like things that are now happening, you meet people, you go to conferences, you get new members on board, they share knowledge. So all of that, even what you're doing right now, a piece of that, a fraction of that can be used and can be spread around different channels. So if you do this for the brand that you have, and you use AI, of course, to amplify that, to adapt the tone and so on, then you're really winning. And so that's for me what fractal storytelling is.
How about stories, Joeri, which is your third, most important concept, and how do you see the value? I mean, I think we can all agree that storytelling is important, but how do you then create stories that stick and stories that matter?
Yeah. So you said it's the third. Actually, it's on my list of 8 points. It's the third point, but all of these 8 ideas are important, I would say, or I feel that they are valuable. Now, stories, yes. That's also my podcast. It's called Web3 CMO Stories. If people ask me, what is your podcast about? Is it only about Web3? I say it's about stories. The word stories is the most important. And in Web3, like I said, for me, it's an umbrella term. But people think about Web3, they think maybe about wallets or about crypto. Now, for me, my podcast, like I said, it's all about stories and about co-creation. That's the whole idea of Web3, where you are co-creating things and co-owning things. And if you can, it's not about funnels, because a lot of brands or marketers, they are used to build funnels. It's about creating stories, and ideally stories that people can tell to others in like 8 seconds. So if about Evolve, for instance, if someone asks me about Evolve, I need to be able to explain this in 8 seconds. And if you can do this and have stories with an essence in it, I think you can make the difference.
What's the one story that that you remember vividly from your podcast that surprised you?
Oh, there are many stories that surprise. I think you should check out the podcast now. But I still remember, of course, is like the very first podcast episode that I did. And maybe it's an interesting story because it is about how I started the podcast that people remember. I was at the Web Summit in 2021, and I had the opportunity to have the podcast booth, to book the podcast booth. And you know what I did, Carlos? I said, okay, let's book the podcast booth. But I didn't have a podcast. I didn't have a name for my podcast. I didn't have anything. And I said, I didn't have a guest. So I said, okay, let's just book the booth. So the booth was booked. And so, like I said, we are networkers. So I started connecting with everyone around about the conference, about CMOs, and I had the idea, oh, maybe it should be about stories that CMOs tell. And so I was just connecting with other CMOs. And I invited one. And so she came on the podcast. And so the first podcast, of course, it was like, oh no, it's like a mess. But it was in the official podcast booth at Web Summit. And so if people ask me, how did the podcast start? Well, I explain them this story, and this is, people will remember it, right? So I just started it like that.
Yuri, you talk about CMO as a value officer, right? So CMOs moving beyond, which you touched a bit upon this, beyond marketing metrics or funnels to create business value. So can you expand on that?
Yeah, and so the idea for that came when I was talking to Philip Kotler, by the way, a very friendly man. That's also another story how he got on the podcast. But I had the opportunity to talk to him. So he's 93 years old, and he said, "Okay, let me talk about an idea about a book that someone else has written." So he didn't even talk about his own books, about his own ideas, and he said, "Is it interesting?" And he talked about how CMOs should aim for zero complaints. And so for him, it was like, it's a CMO is a chief value officer, because if you have no complaints, you offer value. You can also see it as a chief problem officer. So the idea was that you build value in your product for the customer and also for the ecosystem, and that you should really follow up if there are defects, problems, things going wrong. You need, as a CMO, focus on that, fix that, because if you can fix that, that is I would say, a really good indicator of creating value. And so, talk about this for ages, but that was the main idea why the CMO would be a chief value officer.
Brilliant. Do you know Dave Gerhardt in the US?
No.
And I think you would enjoy. He has something called Exit 5, and he created a community for CMOs and people in marketing, because he says that nobody goes to marketing school or to learn about B2B marketing. And he talks about the first 100 days of a CMO. And if a CMO steps into a company and starts talking about revamping the website, it's the perfect formula to be fired. Like you need to identify the quick wins, start proving yourself, and then over time, after 100 days, start with the bigger, let's say, projects. I like to talk about Audacity, having a bold vision, and not an incremental vision, which is your fifth topic.
And this actually came from my friend Mark Schaefer, with whom and a lot of other marketers I've written the book, The Most Amazing Marketing Book Ever. So his book is about Audacity, and it's about Audacity, that we need Audacity in the age of AI, because today we have AI, and AI is hard to beat, right? I think you also used AI to prepare for this talk. I use AI for my podcast. So AI has the competence. For us as humans, it's difficult to beat AI. But how can we beat AI? It's because, if you ask AI something, you always get like these safe answers. And if you want to be in marketing, you would want to be safe, you want to be great, then you won't have success. And so what Mark Schaefer says, and I really agree with this idea of Audacity, that we need to be audacious. As business, so we have a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners in your community, also people probably watching or listening to this. And I would say that if you are a business owner, if you are a marketer, so you want to grow, you want to do business, you want to sell services, you want to sell products. And if you want to do that, then you need to do marketing. You need to do marketing everywhere, because if you don't do marketing, people don't know, you won't buy from you. But if you are going to do it, then you should not be boring, because if you are boring, you will not get any results. So if you put the effort in it, instead of being boring, I would say be audacious. So this is the whole concept of the book. And then maybe you heard the story about Liquid Death in the US. So yeah.
That's the story I had in my mind right now.
Yeah. So they, I think, maybe talked about it already when we met. But so they sell water, like they sell water with a rock star story.
Mhm.
So if Liquid that can sell water, and
Mhm.
people are excited about this, so then I would say, what excuse do we have? Do others have not to be unforgettable? So be audacious is the message.
You know, we I'm gonna say for me for myself, but I think the topic being audacious. I mean, having lived in Europe now for in Denmark, and I we spoke about it at the that networking event before the main event in Portugal. I think in the US, it's part of the culture. They make big promises. They everything is fantastic and all of that. But there's a there are pros and cons, but I see more pros in the sense that they like to think big. Like they're not afraid of that. Whereby in Europe, my feeling is that if you have an audacious goal, you almost have to excuse yourself. You almost have to, and so I think that is changing. But that's something I feel here. People they have that this sort of um, I don't know. It's kind of like in Denmark they say "jantelov," like you cannot. They say, "Hey, you can't think you're more than others," and this is not about thinking you're more or being arrogant, but it's like having a vision and talking about your vision and saying, hey, this is where we want to get, right? And so I think the reason why the US has so many companies that like they're big, like Apple's and all of that, it's in part we could talk about the system and all of that, but it's because they are audacious. And in Europe, there's so much like so many interesting things, but then there's regulation and there's always something stifling innovation. Like let's think about the problems first and not you know what I mean. So that's my perception
Yeah.
for Europe after so many years here, and why I think I mean there are amazing entrepreneurs here, but a lot of entrepreneurs here they move to the US because they say these guys they think big. At some point they end up doing the move, and so yeah, not sure I want to conclude this in any sense, but really
No,
have
but it's
your take.
you have a point by that. I feel that too. Even coming from a small country like Belgium, when you stand out a bit,
Yeah.
Europeans don't like that very much when you go somewhere else. That's why it was for me like a liberation. I go there, I show my book, and everyone was so excited, and they
Hmm.
take action. So that was a motivator, if you want, sometimes to change places. No, this is right. In Europe, it's a bit like that. Maybe it's also an opportunity, because if
Hmm.
everyone is audacious, then it's difficult to stand out. But if no one is audacious, you can stand out. You will get more, people will
Pushback.
react to it. Yeah, pushback, comments. People will say, but I would not focus on them. Focus on yourself, because that's. Oh, Gary Vee also would say this, because if you don't do something because you are afraid of what others will say, that's
Mm.
not. You will live your life yourself, right?
True.
So that's sometimes take action, and then yeah, you will see, who is with you and who is not.
Um, Yuri, talk about your point number 6, community. So from audience to advocates. I mean, I'm an advocate of yours. You're in my community as well. So I think we get it, but it's always good to reinforce, right? Why community matters.
Yeah, I actually, when I spoke in Oerash, I used a metaphor for that, for community. And on another podcast, I was a guest. I also mentioned that. So think about the medieval ages, the century where we had castles, and all castles were surrounded by water to protect the castles and everyone inside. I see community a bit like that. So if you have a business, a brand, So you want to protect your brand thanks to your community, and the water around the castle is like the community. It keeps the enemy out and it keeps your brand safe. It keeps you strong. People help each other. So within the community, like I said, there is a difference also between with community and with an audience. And it's also not about content purely, but it's about creating a place where people can be together, like in a tribe. And as a brand, as a company, you want to build tribes. You want to build what you are building with also with Evolve. You are building this with your members. You build this with them instead of like selling something. And I think that's important. Community is the new marketing, as people say. Because what stands out in the age of AI too, that is these relationships, right, which you can have in the community.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you price a community? I mean, how do you a question I always ask to, like, let's say a decision maker, like someone who's, I think we had this conversation. I think it's always fascinating talking to creators, Yuri. But it's like, hey, how do you price a referral? Because if you talk to me, like in my world, I'm gonna refer you, and you have to do your work. Like in terms of, I'm not even discussing that your product has to be good or and whatnot. But what's the price of that, of a word of mouth, of a referral, right? Because that's number one, acceleration. I see community as distribution as well. So you have a space where, I mean, I was checking our newsletter, and this is not brag talk, but we have a 50%, above 50% open rate, right? So it's not everyone who's seeing, but it's pretty high, I would say. And people stick around because, well, there's no rubbish there. I believe we are putting an effort, and so that's distribution, that's word of mouth. Um, so how do you kind of counter, or how do you go about, you know, um, pricing your community, and yeah.
Well, referrals on itself, it's like I like you would help me, I would help you. It's not like that.
Mhm.
It's valuable. It's not priced, but it's
Mhm.
valuable. You never know in a chain of things where a first contact can make all the
That's right.
difference.
Hmm.
When I started my first business, there was one guy. I worked as a consultant at
Hmm.
the Ministry of Finance in Belgium, and there was one guy, and I respected him. Some people where he was not always, the um, most he didn't get the most attention. He was like somewhere in a corner. But this guy, I really thought he was valuable to have as a connection. And because when I started my first business, he knew someone that knew someone that knew someone for a big client. I got this big client because he was like the missing chain. When you, how do you call it, a piece of a chain? So you have a chain and you miss like this piece. Without this piece, the chain cannot work. Well, this he was that. So you never know who is bringing what and what it is worth. So I think connections, meaningful connections, not just connections on LinkedIn that you never talk to. not like
Exactly.
uh, not like I did. Oh, what was it? Years ago, I talked about LinkedIn and I compared this with you know. Collectors of stamps. If you use LinkedIn, like you collect stamps or like community, then it's not really a network. You need to connect with those people. You need to talk to those people and so on. So it's really valuable.
Mhm.
And I don't sell it. I sell the people get it. If they work with me, they get my network too. It's a bit
Mhm.
like that. If they work with me as a fractional CMO or
Mhm.
as a content creator, or they come on my podcast or they join my retreat,
Mhm.
I will connect them with they want if I can help them, and this brings all the rest, I would say.
Brilliant. Let's talk about the two final points. You talk about marketers or CMOs being technologists, and being pretty much those who drive, who steer the direction of the organization. So could you expand on that, Yuri, please?
Yeah, so the role of a CMO is an important one, of course, because you sometimes people you come in too late, or because people sometimes are too scared about doing marketing. But a marketing guy, he also needs to know the tech, like I call it, a marketing technologist. So he works with AI. I got the other question of a company. There's a chance I will work with them. How would I manage something? I said, okay, I will definitely use AI. I will use AI agents. I will do it like I will set up the best ideal team of people, on the ground, working at the office or remote, but also AI agents, and then to make the best team. So for that, I need to know technology, and so the CMO is someone who is not only there, like in the briefing room or like on the side. It's really in the boardroom. He really knows about. He needs to have a lot of skills, and and he can talk to the CTO, he can talk to the CEO, to the CPO too, because he needs to have I would say, touch point knowledge of all those things. And that's why I feel good in my role as a fractional CMO, because I'm a business engineer. I studied that. I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I had my business analytics company, which helps me now to go in the discussions with CTOs when it comes to business and marketing.
Very good. And the last point you mentioned is that the CMO is a driver of change. So can you describe how the CMOs, being captains of the ship, how they can really take a seat at the leadership, and
yeah, I would say it's about all the transformation that goes with it. So it's not about titles like I am the CMO, people like to call themselves, the CEO, CTO, CMO. It's about transformation. It's about strategy. And so CMOs indeed need to speak the language of sales, product, finance, like I mentioned. They need to have these skills. And it's about not to miss the wave. I'm always saying this. There is now a wave. So there was a wave when computers came, a wave when the internet came, a wave when social media came, a wave when all these waves. Now there's a big wave coming, and you don't want to miss it. And so for me, as a captain of the ship, as a CMO, he's the one leading or showing how to catch the wave and not to miss it, I would say.
Brilliant. All right. That was it. Gustavo, do you have questions? I can see that we have some people watching on LinkedIn, but no questions. They might come through later, Yuri, through in our community. I'll let you know. Gustavo, if you'd like to join us and ask your questions, you're very welcome as well.
Before I forget, Carlos, if people have now been watching until now, people from the community, from your followers, and they want to join the Synergist retreat, for people who mention Evolve, they get a 10% discount.
All right.
This will, if you watched until now, I think you deserve it.
Perfect. We'll talk about it about when we wrap this up, so we can make a proper promotion, Yuri.
Absolutely.
So, hey Yuri, thank you for the time, for the conversation. It's been very, very insightful. But when I ask you one question that I'd like to do is for the new CMO. So for the people that are that want to become a CMO, or to be a better CMO, more comprehensive knowledge. What should you, if you could choose one skill or one subject for them to focus, what should it be?
Well, yeah. So the CMO, like I said, it touches a lot of domains. So you have a look at yourself, what you are good at. So for me as a CMO, if people ask me what am I good at, like, okay, I say the networking but also I love to create content. I love to connect to people. I love to create communities, which is part of the CMO role. There are other parts of the CMO role which are maybe even more technical that I understand as a CMO, but cannot always implement myself. But some things I'm really good at. So I would say focus on what you're really good at and give this another push. So then you stand out as a CMO, because if you're doing what everyone else is doing, you can have the CMO title, but you're not really standing out. So you need to have something that makes you different, that makes you a bit audacious, if you use this word, but that makes you stand out. And focus on making that better instead of working all the time on your weaknesses. I would work on my strengths. And that's what I did too with my podcast and everything that I've been doing. I'm focusing on growing that instead of in growing on the aspects that I may be less good at.
Great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gustavo. All right, so Joeri, so that was Joeri, ladies and gents, who stuck with us, who managed to stay with us until now. Joeri has a gift for Sintra Synergies, which is your retreat, right, Joeri? So perhaps you can talk more about it. Also, talk more about how people can find you if they're interested in your content, interested in your services as well.
Yeah, so first thing is, of course, we are now live on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there. That is my main social media platform. But you can find me everywhere with my name, Joeri Billast, which is not, I think there is only one person with my name. I also launched a TikTok account not so long ago. So if you're on TikTok, check it out, AI with Joeri. It's starting from zero, and I have like one, how can I call it, viral video around AI. So it's quite fun. But if you want to connect with me from other services, for my fractional CMO services, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, which is web3.net, which actually is Dutch for Web3, but it's an English website. I have my podcast, which is called Web3 CMO Stories. Check it out. There are lots of, it's like going to a restaurant. You have a dish for everyone, a lot of AI, a lot of Web3 for all different sectors. And then there is my Sintra Synergies retreat. It's sintrasynergies.com. Sintra, like the place in Portugal, close to Lisbon, where you have the magical palace. Check it out. Google it if you never saw the palace. It's in nature. There are beaches here. There is really this specific energy that you haven't felt anywhere else. The ideal place to do a retreat. So we will be gathering together with 15, 20 other people leading or doing stuff in the Web3 AI space or in emerging technologies. We will be together. We will be connecting, creating community, doing meaningful things together, partnerships and learning. And it's not only one retreat. That's what I wanted to add too. It's a mastermind that will be continue after the retreat too. So the retreat is the highlight of a series of masterminds.
That's awesome. All right. So Joeri, appreciate your time. Appreciate you. Thanks very much. And that's
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.